Have you ever been taking photos in the fall and then you go home and you upload your photos onto your computer and then you're scrolling through them in Lightroom and you put your regular presets on them and you're like, hey, where did the fall go? Pull up a chair because today we're gonna show you how to make a preset that's dedicated to fall colors.
Let's go. Oh, and thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now let's go. All right, so we're in Lightroom Classic and I've loaded up a handful of fall photos. To kick things off, make sure that your white balance and exposure is relatively correct. You can always make additional adjustments later, but when starting an edit, this is step one. Next, I'm going to create contrast in the tone curve. Just make sure point mode is selected. At its default, there is no curve, it's simply linear, but to maximize the autumnal feel of the photo, I'm gonna make things a touch moodier and add points below this 45-degree line, except for the first point. I'll start with a slight bump to the black point, a few points in the shadows, and then one at the halfway point, and one 3/4 of the way up. And take the right point and bring it down. This will compress the tonal range a bit. I saved a curve earlier that I'm gonna load up, however, just because I got it pretty much exactly where I wanted it, and it can be tricky to recreate. I also like making adjustments to the parametric curve. I'm gonna drop the shadows around -24, and then bump the highlights to the 30 range to give it more contrast. And while it may sound strange, I then like to lower the overall contrast just so it's not overly punchy. -15 or so should be fine. Next, I'm gonna lower the black levels to -10, but bump the shadows to around 70 so we don't lose too much detail in the darker areas of the image. Now, lowering the highlights a bit will retain some detail in the brighter parts of the image, which we don't have a lot of in this image, but it should help out on other types of photos we may want to use this edit on. -35 should be good. To add a little more richness to the tone and color, I'm going to boost the dehaze slider up to 40. And now let's bring vibrance down to -10. Vibrance lowers the intensity of the less dominant hues in the image as opposed to saturation, which affects the saturation of all colors. These different techniques of adding contrast in the tone curve, taking it away in the global contrast slider, adding dehaze, boosting shadows, etc., help keep my photos balanced and not too dramatic in any direction. Let's head on down to the very bottom to the calibration section. I think I say this in all of our Lightroom videos, but calibration affects the RGB values of every pixel. And if you want to learn more about it, we made an entire video about it, which I'll link below. Here, I want more green in the shadows, so close to -20 will be good. It's a subtle adjustment that may be hard to see in the screen recording, so I recommend you play with the sliders on your own to really see the effect. Now, if we shift the red primary hue to the right, we can see it really introduces this yellowish color, and to the left, we get a magenta pinkish reddish color dominating the image. I think just a slight bump to the right is good. And just the slightest decrease in saturation. So those first two adjustments were pretty subtle, but I'm gonna get a little crazy with the green primary. I'm gonna crank the hue to the 80s. This gives the colors a more auburn hue, which feels pretty fallish to me. But I don't wanna get too crazy, so I'm gonna drop the saturation to -20. Now for the blue primary, I'm gonna drop the hue to -15 or so, which does bring out a more reddish orange color. And I'm gonna give the saturation a little bump to finish this section out. Okay, with that out of the way, let's head to the HSL section. I'm gonna make the reds a little more orange, and the oranges a little more yellow, and the yellows a little more orange. And for the saturation, I just want to drop the reds and oranges a little bit. Keeping the adjustments subtle here and doing the heavy lifting in the calibration section helps this preset to work better across a wide variety of photos. Since we don't have a lot of the other colors present in this image, I want to copy these settings and see how they look on a photo in a different location with a different subject and see if there are any other adjustments we should make. So just click the copy button in the bottom left. You can select everything and just deselect photo-specific settings like exposure, white balance, and cropping. Let's see how it looks on this photo of Carlton and Chesterfield. I'm actually pretty pleased with how this is turning out. It can be hard to tell how the edits will translate to a completely different photo, but this is looking good. I think I'll drop the saturation on the greens, aquas, and blues. And then maybe down in luminance, drop the greens as well. Cool, let's head into the color grading panel. I'll start with the global color. Here you can really add a nice color cast to your photo if you want. I think a little green is nice, like around 92 for the hue. And let's keep it minimal with like 5 for saturation. I also want it to feel a little colder, so let's go into the highlights section. I'll pick a bluish hue, and somewhere between 10 and 15 for saturation should be good. Okay, let's go ahead and save this as a new preset. Again, we can deselect any photo-specific settings, then click Create. Let's now apply it to a handful of other images to see how it looks. Okay, now here's an example where there is no human or animal subject to worry about, and it looks a little washed out. So here we can give saturation a bump. I think that makes a big difference. But you could also take some liberties with the color. You could go into the blue primary section in calibration and slide the hue to the left to introduce more bronzy colors. And you could also go crazy in the hue section of HSL too if you'd like. Let's look at a few more. Yeah, a lot of dog photos, I know. And finally, let's go back to the first photo we started with and apply the updated preset. Still looks good. I'll add profile corrections just to brighten up the edges and just add a touch of grain. Okay, so one last thing I'd recommend doing is go through the panels in Lightroom, switching each one off and on to see how each set of parameters affects the overall result. So we can see a pretty big shift in color with the calibration section, very subtle changes with color grading, HSL tones things down, and the tone curve is doing a lot of heavy lifting with the tone range, of course. Doing this can help you learn what parameters may need to be adjusted with your own photos. If you want to download this preset for yourself, it's linked in the description below. And we can give it away for free because... If you've watched our videos before, you probably know that we are pretty big fans of Squarespace. We have been customers of theirs for years, long before this YouTube channel even existed, and still have our 3 Squarespace websites going strong. Usually we do something off the walls for our ad spots, like fake our elopement to trick my mom, spoof old MTV reality shows, or do our best Peloton commercial parody. But I wanted to let you know about some new things cooking over at Squarespace. If you're a photographer looking to diversify your revenue streams, check out their new member areas. This allows you to sell access to gated content like video classes, digital downloads, or newsletters. Frickin' sweet. You can also showcase your photography with Squarespace's professional portfolio designs. Customize the layout, look, and feel to make it your own. Also, you can schedule and book appointments straight from your website. You need to lock in client meetings? Well, they can easily see your availability and reschedule if needed, making your life a heck of a lot easier. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain when you go to squarespace.com/mangostreet, or just click the link in the description. We hope you learned something new in Lightroom in this video. If you like how we edit in Lightroom, we have 4 preset collections at mangostreetpresets.com for you to check out. I think they're like award-winning and critically acclaimed. Just don't fact check me. Bye.